Bruce, thanks very much for inviting us to your studio.
No problem. Good to have you.
I read that when you were young, you wanted to be a jazz musician.
I did. I actually enrolled or applied to study jazz at St. Halifax. They had a new jazz program, it was a diploma program at the time, and I guess my choice was, at least to me, was art or music, because those were the two things I thought I excelled in. My father probably would have thrown in dentistry or plumbing or something like that, a little more practical. But those were my two directions, and when I weighed it out, I did get accepted into the jazz program at St. Halifax, but I also got accepted into the fine art program at Mount Allison, and that's really, I thought, probably have a better shot at a career where I can feed myself if I go into art. And I really didn't know what fine art was at the time. I thought something, I'd hoped something that I would come out with a job from. And, after a year there I kind of realized, well, it doesn't quite work that way. You are what you make, but I ended up transferring from there to graphic design at NASCAD because it was, to me, a little more practical.
But it seems to me that what you do as an illustrator, as an editorial cartoonist, is not unlike being a jazz musician.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. There's certainly an element of improvisation there, and I think you have the left side of the brain working. I mean, they're both arts, and I think you sort of face problems in much the same way. Every day when I start my work, it's a different challenge, and you try to do it in a fresh way. And I'm sure most jazz musicians would look at a solo that way. You want to create something new every time. You're not memorizing something and doing it the same way. I mean, there's work that goes into being good at that, and some of it is repetition. But for the most part, yeah, you're trying to create something new every day.
I was going to say, it's not just improvisation, but there is an element of soloing in jazz, and it certainly is an element of soloing in your journalism that is perhaps more so than people who are reporting with text.
Yeah, well, if you mean that it's a sort of a loner's kind of craft. I mean,
being a solitary endeavor.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, there's no question. Yeah. Most of us are very, editorial cartoonists are very solitary animals, and we tend to, That said, a lot of them have traditionally worked in a newsroom and very close to the hustle and bustle where everything's happening. But more and more, especially these days, many editorial cartoonists work from home, and I know I've had all those experiences. When I started working at the Herald, I was put in a book room off the Herald Library and given a drawing table, and people could come in because it was sort of a reference room where this is before digital filing, and so there was traffic in that room, and not a lot of traffic, but enough to be a little distracting. I wasn't right out in the middle of the newsroom. I had a lot more privacy than that, but I still had, people coming through. And then I got moved into a room where it was just two people, myself and an editor for the editorial pages. He did editorial and op-ed. So he was taking phone calls from readers all the time. Some of them angry about, whether their letter did or didn't get in, or some controversy, whatever it happened to be. And those years, the guy I worked with was a fabulous person. I really enjoyed his company. But trying to shut out those conversations while I was trying to come up with a concept in the morning for a cartoon was almost impossible. And it got to be more and more of an impediment to, getting that creativity working. So I finally said, look, I love working with Reed, but I can't. The gentleman's name was Reed McLean, and but I can't. I can't focus because of the phone calls that he has to take. And so they put me downstairs on a floor that had just been cleared out. They'd moved a department somewhere else. And for the next 2 or 3 years, I was totally alone. I had nobody on the entire floor but me in my office. And that was a little too solitary. That was sort of the other extreme. So I'm all over the map. But anyway, I've come full circle again. I mean, they put me up in the editorial offices after a while. Now I'm working from home most times. So, I do basically have my day to myself, and I can close my door and focus, and that's the way I like it.
Yeah, I confess I'm thinking out loud, but it seems to me there's another way that it's similar to what you do is similar to a jazz musician, and that is in the sense that you have your own sound. Like if I hear Miles Davis, I know it's Miles Davis. And if I hear John Coltrane playing the same tune, a different interpretation, I know it's. And when I look at an editorial cartoon, I know it's a Bruce.
I think I hear exactly what you're saying. It's a stylistic thing, and most jazz players have their own style. You don't want to sound like somebody else, and as an editorial cartoonist, you don't want to look like somebody else. Everyone has influences, as do all these musicians you mentioned. Nothing's really created in a vacuum. You always learn from someone, but then hopefully, most of us have a number of sources, a number of different influences, people that we watched when we were younger, and that all ends up in a fusion with what comes from yourself. What's sort of new and invented from your own artistic personality. And so hopefully, you have enough of yourself that something completely new comes out. And like you say, that's your own sound or your own style.
Where does your twist come from?
Do you mean the style?
No, I mean your take on things.
Oh. You mean being twisted? Yeah.
Well, in the nicest possible, healthiest way. Yeah, that's exactly what I mean.
I appreciate it, and I agree with it. I think it's just a healthy cynicism. I remember when I started out, I sent a few freelance pieces into the Herald back when my wife and I were first married, and I was still an ASCAD student. It was summertime, and I was just trying to make a few extra bucks, and so. I can remember getting my first real inspiration for cartoons when John Buchanan had, the power rates had gone up under John Buchanan. Now, in retrospect, in fairness, he had kept them quite low for a long time, but I just happened to be in a new apartment paying my electricity bill when it suddenly went up by 1/3 or something like that. It was just a very noticeable increase. And, it was still small bucks at the time, but it made a difference to us. We were newlyweds living in a bachelor apartment. And so that made me angry, and it gave me fuel for the fire and the pen. And I started doing, some freelance cartoons that I sent into the Herald. And I think that was my foot in the door.
So were your folks cynics? Were they skeptics? Were they? I mean, it didn't just come from outer space. I mean,
no. I think I wouldn't say that. My folks are, really, really nice people, but I think they have a healthy sense of skepticism, and most of us do when it comes to our elected leaders. There are some people that will, have a healthy respect for someone who takes the oath of office and holds, your future and makes decisions that influence your life in their hands. But, for the most part, we all look at them as human beings. And, they're making decisions that do affect us. So they have to be held accountable for that. And, when they trip up or when they get caught doing something improper or that sort of thing, then people like me have to hold them accountable. And I like that. I love that role. I am a cynic, and I'm not there to be a cheerleader. No one really needs that. I enjoy having a little bit of power in that, instead of just having to take it when things happen that affect me through politics, I can respond, and I can respond on behalf of a lot of people.
I'm going to ask you about what some of your favorite cartoons are in a minute, but before that, I'd like to understand like your process. When you're sort of shuffling ideas and going, oh, what is it? At some point, something must click, and you go, oh, what's that feeling like?
Oh, it's a great feeling when it works. You know, it's a great feeling when it finally happens. You know, that's a really intangible thing. How do you come up with ideas? It's a question I get asked, you know, the most. And, you know, there's no real answer to it. I literally start the day with a piece of paper, write down the most likely issues that I'm going to deal with. And I keep looking down that list and seeing, where can I get an idea here? I'll read the story a couple of times and, you know, whatever the issue happens to be. And, you know, sometimes you just unconsciously just hope something will hit you. And you keep on, you work with visual metaphors, you know, sometimes it's word plays. What you don't want to do is try to go down the same old paths. I see it as a hallway with all these doors. And after 26 years, you've opened the same doors a lot. So you're always looking for new doors to open so that you have something new there. But when that spark hits you, and it's, you know, suddenly you just got a great idea out of the blue. That's really exciting. It just lights me up.
I wasn't so interested in like where the ideas come from, but like the being lit up. It must be a great kick.
It is a great kick. More often than not, it doesn't happen in that instant. It's not like that. More often than not, one of my editors once described it as, you know, you sort of get a germ of an idea, and it's like a piece of rock, and you're slowly chipping away at it, trying to make it a better and better idea until you have a sculpture of some kind. And it takes a lot of it. It's very rarely just cut and dry. Boom, that's the idea. Right to the drawing table and draw it.
So you'll discover it on the drawing table, it will emerge.
A lot of the time, yeah, you have to keep on adjusting and improving, and especially, you know, even the design of the cartoon, a lot of the time that is really key to how effective the gag is going to work, how you set it up visually. But yeah, every now and again, you just get that lightning bolt, and there's an idea there that's already made to order, and it needs nothing else, and you just get all excited because you know you got a home run, and all you have to do is swing. You know.
Helicopters and McKay.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yes, that one sort of. Yeah, those are gifts. You know, those are definitely gifts. Just the issue alone. You know, you wake up and you see it in the paper, and you don't even have the idea yet, but you're already chuckling. One idea that I always think about, because it was one of those ones that just came to me, was back when they had these first ministers, the premiers conferences all the time, because of the, you know, unity issue back when Quebec was going through the referendums and that kind of thing, all the hand wringing over that. The premiers were getting together at least once a year to talk about how do we solve this problem, how can we keep everybody happy, and all this kind of stuff. And nothing would ever come of it, you know. And so they had this one premiers conference where they got together, and after 3 days of hand-wringing and conversation and discussion and everything like that, all they came away with was, we're going to meet in another 10 months. Let's do it again. Nothing else came out of it. And so I'm sitting there stewing over this idea for a while, and I don't know. And again, I have no reason why this would have hit me, but it did. And what it was the image of a bull standing in the field wearing a bra. And the caption over top said, "Useless as a unity conference." And all I had to do was think of that, and it was there. I get to say, you know, tits on a bull, without actually saying it in the newspaper, in a family newspaper. And so that was a joy. As soon as I thought of that, I thought, okay, I have to draw a bull and a bra and some grass. I'm good.
I want to ask you about some of the cartoons that they wouldn't publish, but before that too, what is the editorial cartoonist equivalent of writer's block?
Well, that's basically you call it the same thing because essentially you are writing. You're writing. Well, it's not always verbal, but it's a concept, right? So you're creating. And creator's block. It happens to us, most of us, almost on a daily basis. Very rarely do you wake up in the morning with an idea first thing, and some days it's brutal. Sometimes you go through entire months where every idea has to be ground out. You know,
It's tough.
It's like a fight. It's like a war every day, and by the time of the end of it, you're exhausted. Because again, I've been at it 26 years, and keeping fresh becomes harder with every year. When I first started full time in 1986, any idea I thought of was my own. There was no internet, so I didn't have to look and see what the other cartoonists in the country were doing or anything like that. I have a syndicate now, so I kind of have to look on the website and make sure that I'm not doing something that someone else has already posted on the website. Anybody can see every cartoon in the country at any time, sort of now. But when I started working, there was, us and the Globe and Mail. So really there was only one other cartoon available in Halifax.
So the Montreal Gazette wasn't here, was it?
No, it wasn't being sold. I mean, you could probably find it in some news store, but it wasn't readily available. Whereas the Globe was, I think you could get home delivery of the Globe. I'm not sure, but really any idea, especially if I were doing local politics, any idea I thought of was mine, and it was all new to me. Something I might have thought was completely original because it was the first time I thought of it. Might have been an old cliche in editorial cartooning circles. But when you're starting out, and as far as you're concerned, you have a new audience, and as far as they're concerned, they have a new cartoonist. It's all fresh, and it's harder now.
I'm surprised. I kind of had the notion in my mind that, and I think I'm not atypical that way. People think that the editorial cartoonist is having a hilarious time, having a great time, having more fun than anybody else in the newspaper and getting paid for it.
Yeah.
The idea that you're grinding every day and it's like anxiety. What am I going to do? It's kind of at odds with that image.
Well, everything in moderation. It's not always like that. I mean, a lot of the time it is. It's a job, and it's not like you get to go off in a field and draw what you want anytime. You have a problem to solve every day, and and it has to be solved by supper time. That deadline, puts a little, sucks a little bit of the fun out of it. That said, you do have those tits on a bull moments, where, geez, you just light up your day with one idea, boom, you're away, and, you get to draw for the rest of the day, which is just a joy. So there is a lot of fun in this job, and I don't mean to say, I guess the point I'm making is that the longer you're in it, the more challenging it becomes to stay fresh.
Well, I want to ask you about your favorites and ones that the paper wouldn't publish. So let me ask you, which ones that they wouldn't publish were among your favorites?
That's a good question. I had them all. I had a bunch of them up on the wall for a while, and I'm trying to recall now. Things have changed a little bit because when I first got on, a cartoon could be pulled at any time. And basically, I circulated copies of the cartoon once I had a decent sketch, which was usually sort of midday, and people in the executive offices and editorial management and that kind of thing, they all wanted to see what I was doing. They didn't want me getting them in trouble. So I made photocopies. I think it was 7 or 8 photocopies, and I distributed.
Your job is to make fun of people. What do you mean not get in trouble?
Oh, well, let me count the ways. I mean, there are legal troubles. There are, the whole argument of family newspaper, matters of taste. I'm not going to,
I understand.
Certain things you can do. But you're right. And so, I quickly learned where all the many lines were, and a lot of the time I crossed them, and a lot of the time I got slapped down. And what would happen in those days, in the first 5 or 10 years that I worked for the paper, by the time all the discussions had been completed over what trouble this cartoon might bring. The cartoon was done, and the decision comes down that it's not going to be published, and it's 4:30 or 5 o'clock, and I'm about to go home. So that's it. I don't have time to draw another cartoon that day, and so they put something else in it, whether a syndicated cartoon or more likely a column or something in place of my cartoon. I was always angry about that. I never draw cartoons to have them pulled, to have them not see the light of day. Sometimes I would go into it knowing, okay, this one's risky, and sometimes I'd have discussions with my editors beforehand, and usually, I wouldn't go ahead if my editors were saying that, that's not likely to get published. But then somewhere higher up, it would get axed. And so, that's the way it worked back then.
I can imagine something being pulled on it because of taste and being a family paper, obviously.
Right.
But I would think you have a license to kill, just the free speech and fair comment, and you're a cartoonist, you're a satirist, for goodness sakes.
Yeah. It's gotten better.
I can't imagine what legal line you could possibly cross in an editorial page cartoon.
Oh, there are all kinds.
Wasn't it was the in the Edmonton Journal a long time ago, there was a cartoon about Bill Vander Zalm, who was the premier, pulling wings off a fly.
Yeah.
Something like that. And he sued, and the cartoonist won.
Yeah.
I can't think of a time an editorial cartoonist lost on a defamation challenge.
Well, it's not that cut and dried, unfortunately. And I know that many hold the Bierman decision up as almost the the cartoonist manifesto for editorial freedom. But it's not that cut and dried. We as an association, the cartoonists of the country, looked into it legally, and I've had discussions with our lawyers in Halifax because it's affected me. I've had cartoons pulled by my paper. First of all, if it matters before the courts, and I'm
right. Okay, fair enough.
One example was Gerald Regan, a very very political issue when he was up on sex charges, sexual assault charges. Before he's been pronounced guilty or innocent, if I'm pronouncing him guilty in the newspaper, that's libelous. That's cut and dried. I can't do that. I know I did something that I thought was completely a fair comment at the time when that trial started, that got pulled by our lawyers. And I don't mind telling you what it was. It was a 5-panel card, a cartoon with an overline and 5 panels. And the overline read, "Former Premiers of Nova Scotia." And one of them was Angus L. MacDonald, I believe, and blah, blah, blah. There was, Stanfield, might have been Cameron, Buchanan. And right in the middle, instead of, Gerald Regan's name was down below the panel, but instead of a mugshot like the rest of them, his was a thumbprint. Right, and what had happened the day before was, because he was, I don't know whether he was officially criminally charged or what happened, the trial was about to start, but the headline in the paper was he had been fingerprinted for this crime, or thumbprinted or whatever, and so, I thought, well, okay, that's what's going to be remembered, no matter how the trial ends. To me, that was fair comment. I wasn't bringing up anything that didn't actually happen. He was fingerprinted. And yet, you hand it over to your lawyers, and they tell you he could sue for that because you're implying his guilt. I'm not a lawyer.
You should save all the ones that they killed and publish them sometime when all these people are dead. And
you know what? People say that all the time, but I'll tell you, you find me a publisher that'll do that when it's already been rejected by lawyers that work for the paper. Nimbus Publishing was talking to me about that one time. I published my first book, and they said, we want to see all this, or we'd love to see your cartoons that got pulled. And I said, yeah, that'd be great if you want to publish them, yeah. And then I look at the contract, and the contract is, I'm personally liable. They're not, for these for these cartoons that they're going to publish. So, if they're not willing to take
it's a tempting challenge.
Yeah, well, it is, absolutely. But, it's until you have the lawyers rattling their sabers, you never know how you're going to react.
It has been said that satirists are dangerous people.
Mm.
If they are, maybe somebody should put a warrant out for your arrest.
Yeah, there are certainly. I know a lot of my editors have considered me that way, dangerous, for a long time. They kept a real close eye on me the first couple of years, and a lot of cartoons got pulled. And gradually, my leash got longer, and sort of I realized, you cross the line a certain number of times, you get whacked back over it, and you realize, okay, that's not going anywhere. And everybody wants to know where the line is, and there are so many different issues. I can draw somebody mostly naked in the paper. There are different degrees to which you can draw somebody naked. I've shown politicians from behind with their hairy bottoms and stuff like that. But they draw the line at their wedding tackle, for lack of a better term. You can't show certain things.
Nova Scotia expression.
Exactly.
In the few minutes we have left,
Yeah.
Could you tell us about this one?
Well, I happen to be watching Conrad Black now. He's recently, obviously, making the rounds now that he's out of prison, and he's gone over to England and doing some interviews where the interviewers are a little bit aggressive. And Conrad Black is beyond pugnacious. He's defending his honor quite passionately, and some of the comments made, he's been calling his interviewers all manner of names, and talked about getting up and smashing them in the face and this kind of stuff that you wouldn't think is all that becoming of a lord, a British lord. And but fair enough, I actually kind of admire his ability to defend himself, because he's very articulate, and so I got a kick out of the interview. But I figured, so I dressed him up in the post-prison look with lots of piercings and tattoos, and I have him whacking the interviewer over the head with a lead pipe.
And the thought bubble says?
Thought bubble says, the interviewer is saying, with the pipe through his head, is saying, and in what other ways do you feel prison has affected you, Lord Black? So anyway, I just had fun drawing Conrad. He's got a great face for caricature.
Well, I'm glad you continue to have fun doing it.
Yeah, thanks very much. I appreciate the opportunity, Roger.
It was really nice to visit with you. Thanks so much, and keep it up.
My pleasure. Thanks.
A lot of people count on you.
Yeah. No, it's the world's greatest job, and I hope I can do it forever.
Thanks again.
My pleasure.